Well, I now have the distinct honor of introducing today's featured speaker. Mr. Ashok Kumar Mirpuri took up his appointment as Singapore's ambassador to the United States in July of 2012. Prior to his current appointment, he served as ambassador to Indonesia from 2002 to 2006, High Commissioner to Australia from 2000 to 2002. Mr. Mirpuri graduated with honors from the National University of Singapore. He received his master's degree at the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies. He attended the Program for Executive Development at the Institute for Management Development, Switzerland, and the Advanced Management Program at Harvard Business School.
Thank you, and thank you for that very warm welcome to St. Louis and to this lunch that the World Trade Center of St. Louis has organized for me to speak to you about opportunities and perspectives from Southeast Asia. This is not my first trip to St. Louis. I came here, I started my posting about 2 years ago, and about 18 months ago I came here and had an opportunity to have dinner with Senator Kit Bond and Linda Bond, who were very hospitable. And I want to recognize Senator Kit Bond for the role that he has played in really laying the groundwork for many of the things that the United States is today doing with Asia. Senator Bond discovered Asia before many other people in the US. And he's a great friend of all the countries in Southeast Asia, and we truly value and treasure the role he has played. And in many ways, some of the things he has done is the way that other political leaders from the United States are now engaging the Asia-Pacific. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Mayor Francis Lay, who was here earlier. He had to leave for another speech. And Mr. Charlie Dooley, who sat with me through lunch and updated me on what is happening in St. Louis and kept me entertained through the lunch, I must say. He promised you a 1-hour speech from me, but he's my cue. You see, when I see him nodding off, I will then stop speaking. Yesterday, when I flew into St. Louis, I had a busy day. I took the time to go to Washington University at St. Louis, met some of the students there who are interested in politics, interested in global affairs. I did an interview with the Washington University Political Review, had an hour-long session with students studying politics, and then had a dinner reception with some of the Singapore students at Washington University at St. Louis, and other Singaporeans who are in this area. I didn't realize that we had so many people here. Some are here on semester exchanges, some are here on longer programs, some are doing master's programs. And as they described to me some of the things they're achieving over here, and what the foundation that Singapore has offered them, and then that unique opportunity to connect here with the US, they are in many ways more ambassador than I am, because they're ambassadors of Singapore in St. Louis, and will go back and be ambassadors of the United States and St. Louis in Singapore. So while you have your Mosaic program for 9,000 foreign students over here, can you just leave my 50 Singapore students alone and let them come home, please? Because we need them to come back. We're as short of talent as you are, so I will make every effort to make sure that they have good jobs when they get back home to Singapore. I want to congratulate the 3 awardees. The Danforth Plant Science Center, that has some connection with Singapore. Holtec, and Mr. Holt spoke about his connection with Singapore. And Rawlings, where you have a market to build in Singapore. Because we don't play baseball in Singapore, at least not yet. So as you reach out into the Asia Pacific, there is something that you can grow into. So congratulations to 3 of them. Now you have many global companies here. Many of them, sponsors this afternoon, are in Singapore already or interested in doing business in Singapore. And as I looked at St. Louis and Missouri, I realized that although you are the heartland of the United States, you are not landlocked with your geography. You have the mighty Mississippi at your doorstep. You've been the gateway to the Western Territory of the United States. And surprisingly to me, you were the first non-European city to host the Summer Olympics in 1904, which I never realized that. You were globalized before anyone spoke of globalization. And being at the crossroads in many ways has shaped St. Louis. And you see it most prominently across the board in the music industry, what it has reached out to the world. I mention that because there are many parallels with Singapore, where I come from. Singapore is not landlocked. We're surrounded by water all around. We're a small island city-state, geographically about 400 square miles, 5 million people. But in many ways, we are the crossroads as well. We are the crossroads of the Asia-Pacific that connect the Straits of Malacca to the South China Sea. As you look at a map of the region, much of the global trade passes through Singapore. We're the crossroads of food and culture, and mostly the crossroads of economic activity in that region. In many ways, our history goes back, like St. Louis, to the 19th century. The British came and created a port in Singapore. They saw the strategic location that Singapore is in and felt that this was a place where they could grow that economic links throughout the region. And today, Singapore has become the economic hub for U.S. businesses in the Asia-Pacific. It will surprise you to learn that there are more U.S. investments in Singapore than in China or in India combined. It's because we have created an environment for these businesses, a whole legal, financial ecosystem that helps them reach out throughout the region. I was in Detroit earlier this week. General Motors has moved their regional headquarters from Beijing to Singapore. And they see that using Singapore as a hub to reach out to the whole Asia-Pacific. For Missouri as well, we are your largest export destination in Asia. We are your fourth largest export destination. From ASEAN, we're number 1, Asia, we're number 4, and in the world, we're number 10. And this of a small country of only 5.5 million people. It's been a critical process for us that our growth has come from a very close relationship with the United States. And I'll speak a little bit about that in the later half of my speech. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about Southeast Asia, this Exploring Southeast Asia, and I want to congratulate the World Trade Center of St. Louis for putting together that video. Those of you who are not familiar with Southeast Asia, those are images of different capitals of Southeast Asia with the magic dust of connecting it with St. Louis. And that's really where I think so much of your future opportunities are going to lie. In Southeast Asia, we have come together collectively after a fairly difficult history. In many ways, Southeast Asia was not a natural partnership as we came together. But 47 years ago, we created an organization called ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It's been a slow process of moving forward, of building together a regional body that connects a large country like Indonesia with 250 million people and a small country like Brunei with 300,000 people. Different cultures, different backgrounds, different religions, separated by water, and sometimes very difficult water to get across. But we've decided that our future is really linked together as a grouping called ASEAN. And that's where we're putting a lot of effort to build up an ASEAN economic community. Everyone knows the growth stories of China and India. These are two significant regions, countries, 1.3 billion people, 1.1 billion people. Southeast Asian countries on their own will never be able to compete with either China or in India. But what our leaders decided to do about 10 years ago was to say that we can use the growth of China and the growth of India as wings to propel us forward. But it required us to bind our 10 countries a lot closer economically. So next year, at the end of 2015, we're going to launch the ASEAN Economic Community. There's going to be greater connectivity among the 10 countries. So for companies that reach out to Southeast Asia, you will find that it'll be much easier to do business across borders. You can produce your products in one market, to complementary activities in a separate market and pull it all together, and it becomes an ASEAN product. Very easy for you to reach out and to be able to do that. We have 600 million people together, which is larger than the EU. And we have a huge economy of $2.4 trillion. And that's really where, in many ways, the future of companies in the United States is going to be. As you see a growing middle class in Southeast Asia that wants to have products that they're familiar with watching on TV and movies, that's where US companies will be reaching out, a growing developed market for you. Now, Singapore is at the heart of ASEAN in many ways. I don't have a map here, but if you look at it, we are right there in the center. We have created that hub that allows international companies, not just from the US, also from Europe, from South America, from China and India, to come together. I have here several of my colleagues from the Economic Development Board in Singapore, and they're in the room. The Economic Development Board, they have offices throughout the United States. The closest one to St. Louis is in Chicago. And they've been reaching out to US businesses to help you go out into Singapore and the region. We have provided essentially a one-stop service that will help you go into Singapore and then broaden into the region. What does Singapore offer for you is a financial capital, a intellectual property capital where your intellectual property is protected, a capital that allows you to pull together manpower that you can then use throughout the region, a center for innovation and excellence that is there. There are challenges and opportunities in the region, but in Singapore we try to make it much easier for you. And many of these companies up there have been partners in terms of everything that you do in Southeast Asia. Now, Singapore has also been a very long-standing partner of the United States, and in that, Senator Kit Bond is very familiar with that. When the global changes started taking place in the early 1990s, Singapore opened up its military facilities for the United States to come to use in Singapore. We don't have a US military base, but our facilities are used by your Navy and your Air Force. It's provided a very strong protective umbrella for what is happening in the whole region. The United States is very warmly welcome in the region, and it remains an important partner for all the countries. Aside from the security cooperation, there's a very strong economic cooperation that starts taking place. Singapore was the first Asian country to sign a free trade agreement with the United States. 10 years ago, that agreement came into force, the U.S. Singapore Free Trade Agreement. And 3 months ago, my Prime Minister was in Washington to commemorate the 10th year anniversary of that agreement. And with that agreement, new businesses have started to move into Singapore from the US, new services, new structures of doing things together. Areas like education and services have become very critical as part of that free trade agreement. Now, the US role is fundamental in terms of the success of the Asia-Pacific and ASEAN. And to build on the free trade agreement that Singapore has with the US, that some other countries in the region have with the US, we are pulling together a new structure that some of you may have heard about. It's called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is a very future-looking trade agreement that binds together 12 countries of the Asia-Pacific. The world's largest economy, the United States, plays a leading role. The world's third largest economy, Japan, is a partner. 4 Southeast Asian countries, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Singapore. 2 countries from the Pacific, Australia and New Zealand. 2 South American countries, Peru and Chile, and 2 other countries in North America, Canada and Mexico. With this, we are trying to create an economic architecture that will help to anchor the US and US businesses for the future. If you look at it, it's really a forward-looking agreement as business has changed, as technology has changed, as it is pulled together different areas and different industries, the future of pharmaceuticals, the future of plant science, biologics, intellectual property protection, all these are being addressed in the agreement. It's a very difficult agreement to negotiate. When Singapore negotiated its free trade agreement with the US, it took us 4 years. And this was 2 very different countries, a large economy like the U.S. and a small economy like Singapore. And there were many compelling reasons for us to do it, but it still took us 4 years to pull together that agreement. Now, with 12 economies sitting around the table, it becomes far more complex. But we will get there. We hope to get it done by the end of this year or early next year. And then it goes through a process of being ratified by all the 12 countries, including the U.S. Congress. And that's where I think a lot of support from businesses is very important, to see compelling reasons why this is a good agreement that will pull you together with the Asia-Pacific, keep you engaged in the Asia-Pacific, and really look at the opportunities that are taking place over there. It really is what we call a game changer in many ways. And what we hope to do with the Trans-Pacific Partnership is not to keep it a closed agreement of just 12 countries. As complex as it is to deal with 12, we're negotiating with 12 only. But we feel that after the agreement is in place and ratified, new partners can come in. And new partners from the Asia-Pacific are already interested in coming in. I looked at the numbers. Already today, 50% of Missouri's exports are to Trans-Pacific Partnership countries. This will grow as we get the agreement together. And it is an economic contribution that I think we'll continue to make. Now, Singapore and the United States share many values and many areas of common knowledge and interests. It's something that we have valued since the 1960s. As a very new country, Singapore is less than 50 years old, partnering with a relatively longer-standing country. The U.S. has guaranteed in many ways the security of Southeast Asia. And we have appreciated this, and the Obama administration has played a very important role in terms of their engagement with the Asia-Pacific. This has been warmly welcomed by Singapore and the other countries of Southeast Asia. It's a key reason why all of us want to engage the U.S., because the U.S. provides in many ways the values, the legal frameworks, and other structures that help us build up our economies and has guaranteed us our future. And we hope that the U.S. will remain engaged in the United States, not just as a government and not just from one administration, but really continuously in a bipartisan spirit, but also in terms of businesses, in terms of students, in terms of people going back and forth. And I think St. Louis has a very unique opportunity. As you were globalized in the 19th century with Singapore, you can potentially play a gateway as you reach out to Southeast Asia in order to bring other businesses with you, in order to shape some of your futures over here, looking at models over there as we look at models over here, and pulling everything together to create new opportunities. With that, I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy to take any questions after this. You can come to me. My staff from the Economic Development Board are here as well. We'll be here for a while. You can come up and speak to us. We're very happy to see if there are opportunities that you may potentially have in Southeast Asia for the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, Ambassador, don't go anywhere yet. We do have a gift for the ambassador to thank him for being here with us today. But wait, there's more. One of our award winners today also has a gift. Rawlings got permission to do a Cardinals jersey. We'll be bringing baseball to Singapore yet.